Hello and welcome to your first set of flip video notes. Please make sure that you have your Chapter 1 notes in front of you. We're going to start with Section 1.1, which refers to expressions and formulas. Our objectives with today's video include being able to use the order of operation to evaluate expressions and then to use and transform formulas. We're actually going to use the reverse order of operations when we transform formulas. I'm going to do several examples here and explain what the thought process should be as you work through these, but then I'll give you an opportunity to try some of these out on your own. Once you've had a chance to try them on your own, you can check your answer with the completed notes that will be posted on the assignments calendar on the class website. So let's start here with number 1. It asks us to evaluate x minus y, that quantity to the third power, plus 3, and then it tells us that x is 1 and y is 4. So in this case, the very first thing I should do is replace 1 everywhere I see x and 4 everywhere I see y. So I'll say 1 minus 4 to the third power, which is a little hard to see there, plus 3. And once I've replaced each of the variables with the value they told me it should be, then I'm going to use my order of operations. The first thing it says to do here is to evaluate expressions inside the grouping symbols. Well, in that case, the grouping symbols would be the parentheses, so I'm going to say 1 minus 4 is negative 3 to the third power plus 3. There are no grouping symbols left. This is really just parentheses to show that that's the number taken to the power. And now it wants me to evaluate all power. So I'm going to do negative 3 to the third power, which is the same thing as negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. Well, negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9, and positive 9 times negative 3 is going to give me a negative 27. You're welcome to do that in your calculator, but you can certainly do it in your head as well. So negative 27 plus 3, and whenever there's only one operation remaining, at that point I would simply just do that operation. So negative 27 plus 3 is going to give me a final answer here of 24. So the first thing I did was replace each of the variables with the value it told me to, and in some cases there's going to be more than one variable. And then I used my order of operations that are listed here to complete that problem in the correct order. It does not necessarily mean you're going to work from left to right. In this case I happened to, but I won't do that in every case. So I'm going to let you do number 2, and I'm going to skip down to number 4. And here it says evaluate 8xy plus z to the third power all over y squared plus 5. And so I'm going to work this problem by starting with replacing each of the variables with the values they say. So over here to the side I'm going to write 8 times 5 times negative 2 plus negative 1 to the third power all over, and then my y value was negative 2 squared plus 5. And so I want to work this out carefully using my order of operations. The first step in order of operations was to use grouping symbols, and in this case I don't have any. All of my parentheses are just showing multiplication or collecting that negative sign. Then it says to evaluate powers, and I have 2 of those, so I'm going to do that next. So I'm going to say 8 times 5 times negative 2 plus negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1, but if I take that positive 1 times negative 1 again, I get negative 1. Then down here, negative 2 squared should be negative 2 times negative 2, which would be a positive 4 plus 5. The third step in our order of operations is to multiply and divide from left to right. And so in this case, I'm going to do my multiplication that's right here. So 8 times 5 is 40, and 40 times negative 2 is going to be negative 80. So I'm going to get negative 80 plus negative 1 over 4 plus 5. Then I'm going to add and subtract from left to right. So I'm going to add here and get negative 81 over 9, because I added in the denominator. And whenever you have a grouping symbol like this fraction bar that goes all the way across, it means do everything in the numerator first and everything in the denominator first, and at the very end, your very last step is going to be to actually do the division. So negative 81 divided by 9 will be my last step, which makes my final answer here a negative 9. So for the problems here on the front of your paper, on the front of your notes, Your job is to make sure that you replace the variables carefully and then use these order of operations carefully. It's important to pay attention to what happens when you take a negative number to an exponent. So let's take a look at what your calculator is really asking of you and what you need to pay attention to when you use a calculator with exponents. You've probably seen this work out before, but there's a very big difference between -3 squared, which is going to be -9, and the -3 in parentheses squared. The difference here is that this first example that I've shown you here on my calculator is telling you to square first and then take the opposite of your answer. This one is saying that what you're actually squaring is the -3. And so these two things are very different, and you need to be careful about how you put them in your calculator and understand the difference between the two. So at this time, you're welcome to pause the video and go ahead and do examples 2, 3, and 5 on your own, and then check those answers in your in the notes that are posted on the class website on the assignments calendar. When you're ready, flip on the back to question number 7. You're welcome to do number 6 here as well. If we take a look at question number 7 here, they're giving us a formula, in this case for the area of a trapezoid, and it wants us to solve this information using the information given. So they're telling me that I have two bases, a base 1 that is 13 meters, base 2 that is 25 meters. Those are my two bases. The order of the bases doesn't really matter here because I'm just adding them. The order we add in doesn't matter. And the height is 8 meters. So I have 3 variables that I can plug into this formula. And so even though it's a word problem, you're doing the exact same thing that you were doing on those previous problems. I have A equals 1/2. Instead of the H, I'm going to write 8. Instead of B1, I'm going to put 13. And instead of B2, I'm going to put 25. So then I solve this the same way I did those other problems. I do inside the grouping symbols first, 13 plus 25, so I'm going to do 1/2 times 8, and this is going to give me a 38. And then I'm going to say half of 8, multiplying straight across here, half of 8 is 4, and 4 times 38, well, 4 times 30 is 120, 4 times 8 is 32, so I'm going to guess 152, but I'm going to check this in my calculator. So I'm going to say 4 times 38 is indeed 152. And in this case, we're talking about an area, so it should be meters squared. Surely you've used a formula before. You could do that same kind of process for example number 8, but what I really want to focus our time on is how do you transform a formula. Sometimes, for example, this is asking you to find the surface area of a cone, but really I'm not interested in the surface area. I'm trying to find the slant height in this case, which is the L. So I want to take this formula and I want to solve it so that L is by itself. So if I want to solve for L, I want to move things away from the L. And this is going to require us to use reverse order of operations. Well, the last thing that you would do in order of operations is add and subtract. So I'm going to get rid of the thing that's being added to the L. So I'm going to subtract it. So minus pi r squared on both sides to keep our equation in balance. So I have s minus pi r squared equals pi r L. So there's no other terms over here, so there's nothing left to subtract or add away from the L. So the next thing that I would do is multiply and divide. Well, L is being multiplied by pi r, so I want that to go away. So I'm going to divide by pi r on both sides. The pi r's cancel here and here, and so I'm left with the slant height equals the surface area minus pi r squared. But now instead of writing it all over pi r, I'm going to break it down into 2 fractions, divided by pi r and divided by pi r. Nope, this doesn't have a squared, excuse me. This I can't simplify, but here I can cancel the pi's, and I can cancel 1 r in the denominator with 1 in the numerator. And so I'm going to be left with a final answer here of s over pi r equals, minus r. Let's do another one that's similar here. In this case, they give us the perimeter formula, which is P equals 2L plus 2W, and we want to solve for W here, for the width. And so in this case, I'm going to use reverse order of operations. The very last thing on that list on the other side of this paper is adding and subtracting. So I want to move things away from the W, and things are being added, so I'll subtract them. So minus 2L and minus 2L gives me P minus 2L equals 2W. Well, now there's nothing else to add or subtract to move to the other side of from the W. The next thing from the bottom up on that list would be to multiply and divide. So since there's something being multiplied here, I'll divide by 2 on both sides, and I'm left with W equals, I'm going to break this down into two fractions again. P over 2 minus 2L over 2, and surely these two, the 2 in the numerator can cancel with the 2 in the denominator. So the final answer here is going to be that W equals P over 2 minus L. So if I knew the perimeter and the length, I could work backwards to find the width, or I could simply rewrite the formula and plug it in. We're going to practice quite a bit more with rearranging formulas in class tomorrow. Your job is to make sure that you feel confident with the order of operations for the first few types of problems.